Microphone's on. I'll call to order Board of Zoning Appeals for February 27th, 2023. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from February 13th meeting.
Chairman, I recommend we approve the minutes from February 13th, 2023.
Motion by Mr. Peters, second by Mr. King. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. Next up, any special requests or continuances? Mr. Nelson?
None.
Seeing none, we'll move on to findings of fact. First up is DCA 2022-48, a use variance for Menards.
Chairman, in consideration of the statutory criteria, I move that we adopt the written findings of fact as presented, incorporating the evidence submitted into the record as a final decision and final action for variance petition number BZA 2022-048.
Motion by Mr. Peters, second by Mr. Mull. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. Take a motion for DCA 2023-001 development standards variance for Crossroads Engineers.
Mr. Chairman, in consideration of the statutory criteria, I move that we adopt the written findings of facts as presented, incorporating the evidence submitted into record as our final decision and final action for variance petition number BZA 2023-001.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Mull, second by Ms. Peters. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. And then BCA 2023-002 development standards variance for the Garrett Companies.
Chairman, in consideration of the statutory criteria, I move that we adopt the written findings of fact as presented, incorporating the evidence submitted into the record as our final decision and final action for variance petition number BZA 2023-002.
Ms. Peters, second by Mr. Mull. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. We have no old business tonight. Any old business from the floor? Seeing none, we have new business. We do have four dockets to go through tonight, and some of the dockets have multiple requests, so we will stick to presentation times of 15%, if there are any remonstrators, and then 5 for each rebuttal. I will also try to work through any common answers to statutory criteria so we can combine those together as appropriate. First up is BZA 2023-003. Before we get started, are all the notices and everything in order?
They are in order, and for this petition, I would like to note that they have 2 buildings on one parcel or one property. 2 of the buildings have 2 variances that are the same for each building. So both buildings are looking for a reduction in masonry. Both buildings are looking for, I believe it's a reduction in transparency, if I have that in front of me. And then there is 1 unique variance. So if you wanted to possibly bundle those together, do the motion separately, but the criteria and answers are very similar.
Okay. So we have 5 on this one. We have the masonry front elevation. We have the transparency on the rear building. Masonry up front, so that's the second building I assume. And then transparency again. Okay, I see what you're saying. And then the final one is for natural wood railings. That apply to just one then?
That just applies to 1.
Appreciate the clarification. Okay. Foster, are we good from your end?
Yes, I would move to admit the copy unified development ordinance to the record.
In that case, everyone wishing to present for this particular docket, please stand, be sworn in by our secretary.
Do you swear to this perjury? That's an record, the truth, best of your knowledge.
I do.
And then name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Tom Vander Litcairn, an attorney at Van Baylor Law Firm for Paxton Law here in Greenwood now for 23 years, 225 South Emerson, Suite 181, Greenwood, Indiana, 46143. I represent Tim Crump, who's the owner of 249 North Madison Avenue. I always have my clients here, but today, his wife had a surgery scheduled, so went to that instead of coming to this tonight. So we are here to ask for some dimensional variances. As Mr. Nelson noted, it's, we have 2 buildings on 249 North Madison, north of Main Street, south of south of Fry Road there, as you can see on the east side of the road, kind of in the old town area. This is, and please bear with me, this is the first time I've used, since you guys have moved over to, I usually put the USB in there and operate it, but first time doing it this way. So there's a shot of the building that was built, as I understand it, roughly around 1900, and after it's been renovated today. So you can kind of see the before and after. Oops. Skip the second building. Maybe able to use that arrow to see back here. There we go. So there's the back building. So in the materials that I presented, the building up front is called the primary building, and the building in the back is called the accessory. Okay. So this is a dimensional variance, so we only really have, from a statutory perspective, we have 3 statutory criteria. We go through 4 in our dimensional variances here in Greenwood. When I say the 3 statutory criteria, I'm talking about 2, 3, and 4. The first criteria that we deal with under our ordinance really is, why are we here? Well, we're here because we did a facelift on the building, and we are asking the BZA to decrease the required percentage of masonry pursuant to the ordinance from 75% to the amount currently present as depicted in the attached exhibits. First statutory criteria. Now, what's relevant for your decision is it injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community? But we argue that it's not. It's consistent with this area of Greenwood, and in our estimation, the 75% deals more with new construction, not a residence that was built in 1900, then converted to, as almost all of the properties along Madison Avenue between Fry Road and Main Street, to some business type use. So we think it fits in with the area, and it's not injurious to the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. The second statutory criteria is the property including the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. The value of the area won't be adversely affected. In fact, it will help increase the property value. So you got a property owner that's taking care of their property. They're not deferring the maintenance. They've improved the exterior of the primary building and the accessory building, or front and back. The strict application to the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property, because, as you probably can imagine, we're dealing with a building that was built in 1900s. To tear it down, put on 75% masonry is a practical difficulty. You start getting into terms of, well, this is going to exceed the fair market value of the property, things like that. We just don't think it was under consideration, this specific area of Greenwood, with these homes built, converted to business uses there on Madison Avenue. And the 5th, under our ordinance, the structure is not regulated under Indiana Code 821-10-3 and no hazard area. So that's our first variance request. The next one on the primary building, the one out front, is the transparency. The windows, I can jump right into it and hit this one.
Yeah, the only thing I would clarify is, I believe your answers are probably similar for both buildings, on both
They are.
the previous and going forward. So
Yeah.
let's just, for the record, these answers apply to both buildings.
Okay. So the purpose of our other dimensional variance is to decrease the required transparency percentage pursuant to the ordinance from 60% to the amount currently present, from 60% to the amount that is currently present as depicted in the exhibits. Again, similar, so the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because the proposed deviation from the transparency requirements, windows, won't create any adverse visual impairments. It's not going to stick out. You're not going to drive up Madison Avenue and look to the east and say, wow, that building is a lot different than the other ones. It's consistent with its original construction, as are the other buildings up and down Madison that have been converted to a business use. The third item, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property, including the variance, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because there's no, handling real estate zoning matters for 23 years, I've seen a lot of broker opinions that deal with the value impact in the area. And it's usually traffic, noise, the type of use. We're dealing with a dimensional variance. Whether we've got 2 or 3 windows, it's not going to impact the value within the adjacent areas in an adverse manner. Again, I get back to, we've got an owner that's not deferring maintenance. They fixed it up and it looks nice and it's going to help increase the property values in the area. And the strict application in terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties. Our fourth item under our code. Got a building again, built in the 1890, 1900, 1910, somewhere in that vicinity, can't tell from the records. But to require a building like this, invest in this area, that's important because it matches the other buildings in the area, to comply with the dimensional standards that really are more in line with what we expect of new construction, in my mind anyway, would result in a practical difficulty as applied to this property. And number 5, excuse me, we don't have to worry anything about the Board of Aviation Commissioners. We're not close enough to the airport. So those are the 2 masonry and transparency dimensional variances for the front and the back buildings.
And then what about the 5th one, which is for the balcony, the wood?
So we've got one more dimensional
Natural wood
variance.
railing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of this variance request is to allow for the use of natural wood in connection with the construction of the 2nd story balcony in lieu of engineered wood or metal as outlined in the ordinance. Saw the picture there, the front facade had above the door, had the wooden balcony. The approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because the use of natural wood and construction of buildings and other residential areas, business areas, that's pretty typical. It's not going to be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare to use this building product instead of engineered wood. And it also fits in with the area. Third item under our local ordinance, use and value of the area adjacent to the property, including the variance, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because, again, we're using wood. It's pretty common. It's not going to have it's not going to affect the use of value in a substantially adverse manner the area. Fourth item under our ordinance, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because, once again, to get back to the date this building was built and the area, it fits in the area, to require us to use something else on this building that was built around 1900 would result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. Again, number 5, we don't have to worry about the airport.
Anything else to add, sir?
That's it.
All right. I noticed in the staff report that the staff's in agreement. Yes, Mr. Nelson, anything you want to speak to?
I think he summed it up pretty well. I would say that the transparency, we're not decreasing transparency on the buildings that were previously there. I think we're actually increasing the transparency. We're getting closer to that percentage, but we're nowhere near the 60%. Like was mentioned, is probably more intended for a new build due to the age of this building. We don't think it's reasonable to ask for those levels of masonry and transparency. And as far as the natural wood railing, Our ordinance doesn't prohibit that on the actual deck. It specifies it for the railing, which we thought was kind of peculiar. But staff has no concerns with the proposed petitioner statement of reasons and proposed variances.
Anyone else wishing to speak to this? Anyone online? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Open it up to questions from the board. Mr. Moll,
I'm good.
Mr. King,
The staff report lists subject property is 263 North Madison. I don't know, under location, I don't know if that matters or not. No, but here,
Oh, under the narrative,
I
third
mean,
paragraph says location,
more just a technical question.
which page?
first page under the.
Oh, under the location.
Mhm. The
There's
property is identified above as 249, but is listed in the narrative as 263.
Okay.
So is that an error?
I think 249 is the actual address.
So yeah, it looks like that is the address just north of the property, right next to it. That is, the location criteria there is incorrect for the record. It should be the 249 North Madison Avenue, as was sent out with the public notices.
So the notices are correct.
I can check on those two. $249, yes, they are. Thank you for providing a copy. I have it here too.
We don't need to take any kind of motion to address the staff report correction. We have it on the record. All right. Anything else? Mr.
No.
Mrs. Peters?
No question.
I have no questions either, so I will take a motion to accept all the notices and everything and testimony into the record.
Chairman, I move that we admit all the evidence presented in regard to this matter, including the notices, receipts, maps, photographs, written documents, petitioner's application and attachments, petitioner's detailed statement of reasons, the staff report prepared by the planning department, certified copies of the unified development ordinance and comprehensive plan, testimony of the petitioner, city planning staff, and any remonstrators, and all other exhibits presented, be they oral or written, for consideration by this board in regard to this petition, and to include the testimony of those present this evening.
Motion by Mr. Peters, second by Mr. Moll. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. Take a motion on request number 1, which is to reduce the amount of masonry on the front elevations for the front building.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve this motion to reduce the amount of masonry on the front of the elevations from 75 to 10% with no conditions.
Motion by Mr. Moll, second by Mr. King. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. Request number 2 is to reduce transparency from 60% to 10% on the rear building.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we
Okay,
approve.
let me stop on that. I noticed 2 and 4 both say rear building, so please modify your ballots to make number 2 the front building.
2 fronts.
Let's take a motion on the front building.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the request number 2 to reduce transparency from 60 to 10% on the front building. With no conditions.
Motion by Mr. Moll, second by Mr. Peters. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. The third variance is the reduce the amount of masonry on the front elevation of the rear building from 75 to 10%.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve this request number 3 to reduce the amount of masonry on the front elevations from 75 to 10% on rear building.
Motion by Mr. Moll, second by Mr. King. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, that same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Number 4, reduce the transparency from 60 to 10% on the rear building.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve request number 4 to reduce transparency from 60 to 10 on rear building. No conditions.
Okay, motion by Mr. Mull, second by Mr. King. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. Number 5, the motion to allow natural wood railings.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve request number 5 to allow natural wood railings. No conditions.
Motion by Mr. Mull, second by Ms. Peters. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. Motion to direct the Corporations Council to draft written findings of fact.
Chairman, having considered the statutory criteria, I move that we direct the Corporation Counsel's office to draft written findings of fact regarding our decision on the variance request presented in variance petition number BZA 2023-003. Said findings to specifically incorporate the staff report and the evidence submitted into the record for consideration and adoption by the Board of Zoning Appeals as our final decision and final action regarding this petition at our next meeting.
Motion by Ms. Peters, second by Mr. Mull. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. On that one, you're good to proceed forward. Working with the staff, we'll take final action in a couple weeks. I believe you are sticking around though for the next docket for BZA 2023-004 Development Standards Variance on behalf of Shri Mangalamurthy. Requesting relief from 4 sections of the Unified Development Ordinance. Number 1, front elevations, reducing masonry on the front elevation from 50 to the current amount. 2, allow use of through air units on the front elevation. 3, to allow use of quality vinyl fencing to screen mechanicals on the west side. And 4, to allow 2 pole signs on a single building parcel. All those wishing to, well, before I do that, are all the notices and everything in order on this one?
Everything is in order and in our files. And I would move to admit a copy of the unified development ordinance to the record.
Everyone wishing to speak to this docket, please stand and be sworn in by our secretary.
Swear on Ms. Vernon. That's by Peter Street, that's
Yes.
Name and address again, Mr. Vanderloop Aaron, for the record.
I'm Tom Vanderloop Aaron. I'm an attorney at Van Baylor Law Firm. Our offices are at 225 South Emerson, Suite 181, Greenwood, Indiana 46143. And here representing my client, the owner, manager, Vip Patel, owner and manager of Shri Mangalamurthy Inc.
Okay. Tell us why you're here. I'm sure go through as you did the last one. That went very well. And if there's anything we can trying to look through, if any of the answers are the same, let's be sure to point that out and eliminate repeating anything.
So we are over here, excuse me, coincidentally by my office there, 65 and Main Street. See there, right there, the parcel that's highlighted on the aerial map. It's in South Park, which I always thought a little funny. Because of the show, sorry. So here is, so what we basically have, we're here because Mr. Patel is transitioning this hotel from La Quinta to Best Western. And more or less, as a franchise owner, franchisee, Mr. Patel has to make sure that his hotel complies with the corporate guidelines. And so everything he has done is to the building is to comply with the corporate requirements. So you kind of see the upper left-hand corner picture is what it looked like before, and here's what it looks like after he's completed the work. And there's also some fencing that will come up here in the presentation. This is what the fencing looks like. Besides, this was a custom order from the manufacturer for over $40,000. This is not fencing that you go to Home Depot or Lowe's to buy and put around the hotel. It is a high-end requirement for corporate. And there's the signs you can see, and you can see the McDonald's sign. That's actually the sign for South Park. It's an easement. It's on Mr. Patel's property. there in the back. So you can see the La Quinta sign behind that, you see that the golden arches. And then to the right, you see our panel sign, I forget what it's called under the ordinance, but the box is gonna get bigger, more or less. So that's why we're here on that. So to start off with the statutory criteria first on the masonry. We're here because we want to request a decrease in the required percentage of masonry pursuant to the ordinance on commercial building design standards from 50% to the amount that's currently present as depicted on the attached exhibits, which are the pictures that I just showed to you. And again, we're rebranding from one franchise, La Quinta, to another, Best Western. So number two, again, dimensional variances, so we don't have to talk about the 5 statutory criteria that we have to talk about use by variances. It's just dimensional variance, less rigorous. The approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because the proposed deviation, less than 50% of masonry on a commercial building, will not adversely affect the health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the community. I think it looks better than it did before. Not that that's the standard, but you can see what we've got there. And I think it's, in this case, a picture tells it, speaks volumes. Number 3, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property, including the variance, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because this business park, most of the it's a little different than a residential area. It's still in line with the other uses in the area, which include the restaurant, the multi-level building, office building in the back. The value of those properties. 4, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because the hotel was originally constructed in the mid-1990s prior to the adoption of the more stringent development standards that are in place today. This project involved is a renovation or rebrand. This isn't something that the owner wanted to do. It's something that they're required to do. To rebrand this from a La Quinta to a Best Western. It's impractical for the petitioner to renovate and rebrand the hotel and also then comply with current standards, which would require a lot more than what's been done. Again, to get into the economics of things. And you've got it again, an owner that's taking care of the property, updating it. There's no deferred maintenance here. It has to do with the rebranding of the hotel. So now's a good time to get it a little closer to the ordinance, as Mr. Nelson suggests with the other property on Madison. Here's a chance for us to get a little closer for a building that was built about 30 years ago, when the standards were much different. We don't want to discourage people from owning and updating older buildings. That's it for the masonry. The next variance has to do with the through air units underneath the windows on the buildings. And so the purpose of this, I can jump in to keep going through all the variances.
Yeah, that's fine. That's
The
fair.
purpose of this variance is to allow for the use of through air units, which are prohibited on the front elevation pursuant to the commercial building design standards. Again, we're here before you because we're rebranding the hotel, and we've got to install new materials and a color scheme. 2, the question is will leaving these through air units be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community? No, they won't. The building's been there for 30 years. The intersection of 65 and Main Street continues to be the subject of a great deal of development, especially on the east side of the interstate. And it hasn't prevented the development of the areas in and around it on the west side, north of Main Street. The use and value of the area adjacent to the property, including the variance, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because we're dealing with a commercial building and in South Park, an office park. It's not going to have an adverse impact on the values of the adjacent properties. gonna improve them. You really can't see them in front of the elevation. Picture there at the beginning. They've been painted so that they match now. Can't really see them as well as you might have 25 or 30 years ago. The fourth, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because, again, the hotel was constructed in the mid-1990s, about 25 to 30 years ago, and we're rebranding the hotel, and it requires, got to meet the corporate guidelines. So a good time for us to get a little closer to the ordinance requirements, maybe not full compliance. The next,
The mechanical equipment stream.
let's see. Here it is, sorry, I didn't go all the way back. So again, we're at the screening now, the mechanical equipment again. The owner made a custom order from the manufacturer to purchase over $40,000 worth of fencing materials to use to screen areas of the hotel. That's why we're here. The second criteria item under our ordinance, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because the proposed deviation will not create any adverse visual impairments. The material is high-end. It's intended to exhibit a higher-end use for the Best Western experience. The third criteria, the use of value of the area adjacent to the property, including the variance, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because the custom order of this fencing is actually going to improve the visual impact from neighbors. I don't think it's going to have an adverse impact on the property values. Number four, the strict application of terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because, as I understand it, the screening materials should match the building. The building is stucco, but this is a better, higher end finish with the materials that we're custom ordering from the manufacturer. That will be a practical difficulty for this owner who's going through this rebranding, not necessarily at his own, not necessarily his own decision, just the economy and what's selling in the market will be a practical difficulty. One for all leases, we don't have to worry about that. The last one is the additional pole sign. So this variance request is made because we have two pole signs. Again, one is specifically for this owner. The other one is for South Park and some of the other, so the office building in the back, multi-level, I think it's 3 levels in the back. And then the McDonald's, as you can see, the McDonald's sign is on there. So this is for other users in the area. We don't really have control over that signage, but we do have control over our signage, but we need a variance. In this case, it was a non-conforming use. So when it was built, and then the sign ordinance was adopted, now we've got two signs. It's a non-conforming use, but now we have to come and get a variance, a dimensional variance, because now we're gonna lose that non-conforming status by changing the cabinet size on top of the pole. So we're here before you to ask for a little relief there. Enlarging the case size of the pole is not going to be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. It's just a little bigger. It's not going to affect traffic. It's not going to have an adverse impact on the adjacent properties. In fact, it's long, when a building has signage like this, specific for its property, it will help users find the location. Then strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties. The owner didn't have any say in how South Park was laid out. That was laid out in our prior zoning ordinance. Now we've got new ordinances in place that result in practical difficulties in the use of the property if we want to continue to use our own pole sign. And we don't have to worry about the airport. And I understand the staff has one condition, which we have no problem with, and we'll file a sign variance if in fact this dimensional variance is approved.
Mr. Nelson, you want to talk about staff's comments and findings?
I'm gonna let Kevin, our senior planner, take this one.
Thank you. Real quick, I do want to note that the condition is for a sign permit to be applied for, which is our standard.
Yep.
No, I think staff is appreciative that the petitioner is bringing this building much closer to compliance and more modern than it was previously. It'll look much better coming in off the interstate. So no issues with that. The two pole signs have been there forever. The only reason for the variance on this is they had to take the old cabinet down in order to put up a new one. So it took it technically out of compliance at that time. Obviously, the other pole sign is not theirs. Someone was apparently nice enough to let them put that on their property years ago. So staff does not have any concerns with any variances and is favorable of all of them.
And then the one condition, as you mentioned, for the sign itself is that permit must be applied for and issued before the alterations can occur that are depicted in the CUP. So if you're aware of that, Mr. Van Vanderlee Garrenhuisen.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, no, I misspoke. So I don't like to be a politician when they misspeak in public. It happens.
Yep.
Sign permit, yeah.
Okay, anyone wishing to speak remonstrance to this? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Oh,
Hey, looks nice.
Mr. King,
Yeah, it's an improvement.
Ms. Peters? I have no comment other than I do get nervous going to South Park because I hear they kill Kenny there, so. I'm thankful.
I will say appreciate, I'm not the only one who thinks that's funny when they hear that. For that reason.
Okay, I will take a motion to accept all the evidence into the record.
Chairman, I move that we admit all the evidence presented in regard to this matter, including the notices, receipts, maps, photographs, written documents, petitioner's application and attachments, petitioner's detailed statement of reasons, the staff report prepared by the planning department, certified copies of the Unified Development Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan, testimony of the petitioner, city planning staff, and any remonstrators, and all other exhibits presented, be they oral or written, for consideration by this board in regard to this petition, and to include the testimony of those present this evening.
Motion by Mr. Peters, second by Mr. Mull. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. Take a motion on request number 1 to reduce masonry on front elevation from 50% to the current amount.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve request number 1 to reduce the amount of masonry from front elevations, on front elevations from 50% to the current amount. No objections.
Motion by Mr. Mull, second by Ms. Peters. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Mr. Mull,
Oh, sorry, I was looking for a place to sign.
I was gonna mention, please just sign below the lines. All opposed, same sign. Motion does carry 4-0, but yeah, just sign in the open area there.
Okay.
For request number 2, to allow the use of through air units on a front elevation.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve request number 2, allow for the use of through air units on the front elevation.
We have the same issue with the signature. I have a motion by Mr. Mull, second by Mr. King. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. Number 3, allow the use of quality vinyl fencing to screen mechanicals on the west side of the building.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve request number 3 to allow the use of quality vinyl fencing on screen mechanicals on the west side of the building.
Motion by Mr. Mull, second by Mr. King. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. And then number 4, to allow 2 pole signs on a single building parcel.
Mr. Chairman, I motion to approve request number 4 to allow 2 pole signs on a single building parcel.
With or without condition.
With the condition, sign permit must be applied for and issued before alterations to the sign occur.
Motion by Mr. Hall with the condition, second by Mr. King. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. I will take a motion to direct the Corporations Council to draft written findings of fact.
Chairman, having considered the statutory criteria, I move that we direct the Corporation Counsel's Office to draft written findings of fact regarding our decision on the variance request presented in variance petition number BCA 2023-004. Said findings to specifically incorporate the staff report and the evidence submitted into the record for consideration and adoption by the Board of Zoning Appeals as a final decision, final action regarding this petition at our next meeting.
Motion by Mr. Peters, second by Mr. Moll. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. We'll proceed on that as well. Working with the staff, and again, we'll take final action in a couple weeks.
Thank you. Sorry,
Thank you.
I couldn't turn off my timer.
All good.
That was not my phone.
All right, next up is BZA 2023-005, a development standards variance for Northgate Drive. Petitioner is Donna Wigan, requesting relief on two sections of the Unified Development Ordinance. Number one, a fence height to allow a 6-foot fence in a front yard, and number two, fence opacity to allow greater than 50% opacity for a fence located in the front yard. All those wishing to speak to this, please, well, I'm sorry, pause on that. Is everything in order?
Yes, mailings are in order and they're in our file.
Drew?
And I move to admit the copy of the Unified Development Ordinance, certified copy into the record.
Okay, now, everyone wishing to speak to this, please stand and be sworn in by our secretary.
Reynolds, Berger, Westermark, Judy Westermark. Yes.
And then name and address for the record. You can adjust the microphone as you need to. Perfect. Name and address for the record.
Donna Wigan, 602 Northgate Drive, Greenwood.
All right, Ms. Wigan, tell us why you're here.
Apparently I didn't know I wasn't supposed to put my fence there, and the fence company that put it up apparently didn't know that either. So I just want to not have to move it.
Sure. So you have a 6-foot fence,
Yes,
privacy fence
yes.
in what is technically the front yard, which are both require a variance. So do you have your answers to the statutory criteria with you?
Yes.
So let's walk through those as you heard in the previous two. The first one for the fence height. Number one, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because
The fence is good quality and helps me enjoy my property and does not obstruct the vision from the stop sign.
number two, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because
The fence doesn't block any of the area and is beautiful.
Okay, and number three, the strict application of the terms of zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because
Because the fence is already up and well constructed, and if I have to move that, that's additional cost to me and reduces the amount of my yard that I'm able to use.
And then number four, I will handle, which is it is not regulated under Indiana Code 8-21-10-3 for hazard air navigation. I guess let me ask you, would you have any different answers for the opacity? So all those answers that you just testified would apply to that as well. Which one? Oh, she did mention in her answer, but yeah, the fence does not obstruct vision from the stop sign.
No.
Is your testimony. Okay. Anything else to add?
I just really appreciate you approving it.
Fair enough. Staff, your comments and findings?
Yeah, it's out of the visibility triangle. We have a way of measuring that to make sure that it won't be harmful to drivers or pedestrians. I would also note her doesn't necessarily depict how you would vote, but her neighbor across the street at the corner also received a use variance some time ago for similar fence. So it would fit the, I guess, the character of the surrounding area. We had no objections.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Otherwise, I'll close the public hearing. Open up the question from the board. Mr. Moll? Mr. King? Ms. Peters?
The only one thing that I wanted to make sure that we put in record, this is one of those situations with two fronts because of it being a corner lot. Does create an unusual circumstance there.
Appreciate that, because I was gonna ask the same question. This is a little unique from that standpoint with the two front yards, so allowing the privacy and ability to enjoy the yard, as you mentioned, it's required. Okay. Anything else, Ms. Peters?
I'm good.
I have nothing further. I will take a motion to admit all the evidence into the record.
Chairman, I move that we admit all the evidence presented in regard to this matter, including the notices, receipts, maps, photographs, written documents, petitioner's application and attachments, petitioner's detailed statement of reasons, the staff report prepared by the planning department, certified copies of the Unified Development Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan, testimony of the petitioner, city planning staff, and any remonstrators, and all other exhibits presented, be they oral or written, for consideration by this board in regard to this petition, and to include the testimony of those present this evening.
Motion by Ms. Peters, second by Mr. King. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. All right, take a motion on request number 1 to allow a 6-foot fence in a front yard.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve request number 1 to allow 6-foot fence in the front yard.
Without Mr. Moll. Motion by Mr. Moll, second by Mr. King. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. Again, we
Signature
just
lines.
no signature lines, so just sign at the bottom there. Number 2, to allow for greater than 50% opacity for a fence located in a front yard.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve request number 2 to allow greater than 50% opacity for a fence located in the front yard.
Second by Mr. King. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. Take a motion to direct the Corporation Council to draft written findings of fact.
Chairman, having considered the statutory criteria, I move that we direct the Corporation Counsel's office to draft written findings of fact regarding our decision on the variance request presented in variance petition number BCA 2023-005. Said findings to specifically incorporate the staff report and the evidence submitted into the record for consideration and adoption by the Board of Zoning Appeals as a final decision and final action regarding this petition at our next meeting.
Motion by Ms. Peters, second by Mr. King. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. You are welcome to do nothing to your fence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep it.
Next up, BZA 2023-007, use variance from petitioners Jaden Feller and LaDonna Feller, requesting approval for a use variance in order to operate a salon at 241 West Main Street, where salons are not a permitted use in the OT zone. All those wish, is everything in order? Oh, and they are online. It looks like they're remote.
All the notices are in order and in our files.
Mr. Foster?
And I would move that enter into the evidence certified copy of the Unified Development Ordinance.
All those wishing to present, is there anyone here in present wishing to present or talk to about this document? All right, seeing none, we'll move to those of you that are remote, and we do have visuals. So if you would raise your right hand and be sworn by our secretary.
Do you swear no penalties of perjury to testify to the truth of the best of your knowledge?
We do. We do.
Name and address for the record.
My name's LaDonna Feller. My home address is 7321 Franklin Park Lane. That is in Indianapolis, Indiana, 46259.
And I'm Jaden Feller. My home address is 7321 Franklin Park Lane, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46259.
All right, ladies, tell us why you're here.
Well, we are currently leasing property at 241 West Main Street in Greenwood. I grew up in Greenwood my whole life, so I'm very well aware of Greenwood, love it, and connected to it. And my granddaughter had found this space to lease. because we have started a company, and that company is a clothing boutique as well as offering aesthetic services as well. So she found this location and we loved it. We loved the revitalization that's going on in downtown Greenwood. And we thought this would be perfect there because it would draw in a wide range of ages of people, different backgrounds, and with the other businesses already there in place, it would just hopefully promote even more foot traffic, as well as now with the added parking places that people can go, you'd have people who could park there as well. So it was a dream of ours to open this and to offer something. We're both very community minded and would love to connect with the other businesses surrounding us to just continue promoting more business, for the city of Greenwood. And we think this is one way to do it.
Good. Do you have your statement of reasons, your statutory criteria answered with you?
Yes.
Oh, yes, we do.
Let's walk through those if you would. So number
Okay.
one, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because
Because the services that we're offering are actually positive things that would help promote more finances to the city itself. It also would be adding places that young, old people could shop or seek aesthetic services if they so desired. And there's nothing that's being done in there that is in any way illegal, wrong, dangerous, or would be a negative to the city.
number two, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because
But I don't think they'll be affected adverse at all. I think if anything, the traffic that we would draw in would more than likely possibly, choose to use the services of the surrounding areas as well, the businesses that are there, that are located there. So it's definitely more of a positive. It would never be a negative.
Okay. Number three, the need for the variance arises from some condition peculiar to the property because
Yeah, it's, we kind of find this out a little bit after we already got the lease, but it's our understanding that the current zoning does not allow for personal health and beauty at this point in time. So that's the reason that we've applied for the variance.
Okay. Number four, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will constitute an unusual and unnecessary hardship if applied to the property for which the variance is sought because
Oh, yeah, it won't cause any issues there. Let's see here. We just feel like the things that we're going to offer as far as the boutique and the aesthetics is that people are going to seek those services somewhere. And so if we didn't open this, then they're going to look for those services elsewhere. So why not have something that would draw them to downtown Greenwood? And then again, that would benefit us as well as the surrounding businesses that are around us.
okay. And number five, the approval does not interfere substantially with the comprehensive plan because
Let's see here. So, well, we think that it's actually going to possibly attract even new patrons because usually if there's something new in the area, people tend to want to gravitate toward that. And so we feel like it would help to increase the foot traffic for sure, since you can walk easily up and down, the sidewalks there and they're doing a great job of redoing the sidewalks. So that's nice too. So we just think that everything that we have to offer just blends in well with what's already there. But, the component that we add, having both a boutique and an aesthetic in one location, a lot of, at least women, I can say for sure, appreciate that. So I think the business as a whole would be nothing but a positive.
okay. Anything else to add before I ask staff for their input?
No, we're really excited and we'd love to get started. And like I said, when we first leased this space, we weren't even aware that there was an issue. And so we've been patiently just biding our time to have our chance to speak. And hopefully you'll see that we will be a positive addition to that area and we'll just keep moving on. And we'd invite you to come to the shop if we get this going.
You'll like working on my hair for sure. Okay, staff, I noticed you have a comment to statutory criteria 3 specifically, and then your comments and findings overall.
Yeah, overall, staff is in favor of this petition. Like staff opinion is this is reason for this variance is more of a deficiency in our UDO, as this is, I believe, the third salon that's come before you in the past 2 years, so no reason why they shouldn't be allowed to do this downtown, is a perfect place for it.
Very good. Anybody else that should speak to this? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Mr. Mole?
Nope, I'm good.
Mr. King?
No.
Ms. Peters?
No.
I have no comments either. I am very, very well presented. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will take a motion to admit all the evidence into the record.
Chairman, I move that we admit all the evidence presented in regard to this matter, including the notices, receipts, maps, photographs, written documents, petitioner's application and attachments, petitioner's detailed statement of reasons, the staff report prepared by the planning department, certified copies of the Unified Development Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan, testimony of the petitioner, city planning staff, and any remonstrators, and all other exhibits presented, be they oral or written, for consideration by this board in regard to this petition, and to include the testimony of those present this evening.
Motion by Ms. Peters, second by Mr. Mole. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. A motion on the request itself, which is to approve a use variance in order to operate a salon at 241 West Main Street. Salons not being a permitted use in the Old Town or OT zone.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve request number 1, requesting approval of the use variance in order to operate a salon. At the address, salons are not permitted use in the Old Town zone.
Motion by Mr. Mole, no conditions. Motion by Mr. Mole, no conditions. Second by Mr. King. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. And again, just sign the open. I will take a motion to direct the corporation's counsel to draft written findings of fact.
Chairman, having considered the statutory criteria, I move that we direct the Corporation Counsel's Office to draft written findings of fact regarding our decision on the variance request presented in variance petition number BCA 2023-007. Said findings to specifically incorporate the staff report and the evidence submitted into the record for consideration and adoption by the Board of Zoning Appeals as a final decision and final action regarding this petition at our next meeting.
Motion by Ms. Peters, second by Mr. Mole. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. That motion carries 4-0. You are welcome to proceed. We will take final action in 2 weeks, but that's just a formality from our standpoint. So you're welcome to work with the staff and move forward.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, any new business from the floor? Seeing none, any announcements?
Corporation counsel.
None, we're staying busy, so
Agenda
we'll
Got
be
more-
seeing
got
you
more
next
in a
time.
couple weeks.
Yeah.
That way. Yep, all right. Take a motion to adjourn. So moved. Microphone's off, recording stop.